The desert sun hit Tumbleweed Junction like it held a personal grudge. Heat shimmered over the dusty main road as wagons creaked by, and the day crawled on with that slow western rhythm that always reminded Naomi Hart she didn't belong here, at least not in the way folks expected. Most women her age hid behind fans or husbands, not Naomi. She owned her place behind the bar in Tumbleweed Saloon, pouring drinks with a raised brow and a don't-test-me smile that kept rowdy cowhands in line. She wasn't small, wasn't fragile, and wasn't interested in shrinking so anyone else could feel tall. And, Lord help her, nothing interesting had happened in weeks. That changed the moment the saloon doors creaked open and he stepped in. The whole room went quiet, like someone had pressed a hand over the world's mouth. Naomi looked up from polishing glasses, and her breath caught so sharply she nearly swallowed her gum. The man filling the doorway wasn't built, he was constructed, like some blacksmith god in the hills hammered him together just to show off. Colt Maddox. She didn't know his name yet, but she'd learn it soon enough. He had a wide-brimmed hat shadowing half his face, a jaw cut from granite, and shoulders that made the doorframe seem decorative. Dust powdered his boots and the hem of his long duster coat. He carried a saddle over one arm like it weighed no more than a loaf of bread, and when he stepped inside, every set of eyes shifted, some wary, some intrigued. Naomi wasn't either. She was annoyed. There was no room left in her day for surprises, especially gigantic ones with slow, heavy footfalls and an aura that said, "I handled trouble," instead of starting it. He approached the bar, each step a quiet thud on the wooden floorboards. Naomi crossed her arms. "If you're here looking for a room, we're booked solid. And if you're here looking for a fight, take it outside. I just had these floors scrubbed." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tip her chin up to meet his eyes. And when she did, Lord, they were winter storm blue, quiet, watchful, unbothered by her attitude. His voice was low enough to make the countertop vibrate. "He's just water, ma'am." Ma'am. The words sank into her skin like warm honey. Naomi rolled her eyes to hide the fact her knees weakened slightly and grabbed a glass. "No whiskey? That's a first for anyone walking in from the heat." He removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair and a scar near his temple. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make her wonder who had dared leave it there. "A clear head keeps me alive," he said simply. "You some kind of preacher? You've got the whole mysterious staring into your soul thing down." One corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "No preacher." "You running from something?" "Running to something," he answered, sipping water like it was some sacred ritual. "And what's that?" She leaned forward, chin propped on her hand. She didn't flirt, not really, but she liked getting reactions out of people, especially big, quiet ones. He met her gaze and didn't blink. "Work." That was it. That was the full statement. No explanation, no details. Just one syllable that should have annoyed her, but instead fascinated her more than she cared to admit. Before she could pry, the doors swung open again, this time letting in a pair of dusty ranch hands with more ego than sense. The kind who smelled like sweat, smoke, and choices they regretted only when sober. "Naomi, sweetheart," one slurred, stumbling toward the bar. "Give us a smile. Pretty thing like you shouldn't be hiding behind no counter." Naomi stiffened, already preparing to put them in their place. But Colt moved faster. He didn't touch them, didn't raise his voice. He simply turned, rested one massive hand on the bar, and looked at them. A slow, dangerous cowboy look that said, "I don't want to hurt you. Don't make me reconsider." The ranch hands froze. One muttered something about minding his own damn business, but his voice trembled. Naomi raised a brow. "Well," she murmured, Looks like someone finally scared folks worse than I do." He didn't answer. He just took another drink of water. "You always jump in like that?" "Only when needed." "And how'd you know I needed it?" He studied her a moment, long enough for her pulse to do a strange little trip hammer rhythm. "You didn't," he said, "but I didn't like the way he spoke to you." She swallowed slowly, quietly. Dangerous men were predictable, loud, showy. They barged into your world demanding attention. Colt Maddox was the opposite. A danger wrapped in silence. A storm pretending to be a breeze. She hated how much that intrigued her. "You taking work around here?" she asked, voice steady, despite the flutter in her chest. He nodded. "If there's work to take." "There is," she said, "but it's hard work." "I don't mind hard." Their eyes locked, and for a moment too long, neither looked away. Then she broke the tension with a scoff. "Fine. Let me see if the owner wants help on the ranch." But before she stepped away, she heard his voice again, quiet, deep, and startlingly gentle. "Ma'am, thank you for the water." She didn't know why that made her smile, didn't want to think about why her heartbeat tripped over itself. But she knew one thing. This giant cowboy was trouble, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to stop it or invite it in. Tumbleweed Ranch sat 3 miles outside town, the kind of place where broken fences leaned like tired old men and dust clung to everything like gossip. Naomi had grown up in places like this, where work started before sunrise and never truly ended. But she hadn't set foot on a ranch in almost a year, not since her mama passed and she traded outdoor labor for bar shifts and the reliable comfort of polished wood beneath her palms. But today, she was back, and she wasn't alone. Colt Maddox rode beside her on a borrowed bay mare, the saddle creaking under his weight as the early evening sun traced fire across the horizon. Naomi walked on foot, boots kicking up little clouds behind her, refusing his offer to ride with him. "I'm fine walking," she'd said. Truth was, she'd panicked, imagining herself perched in front of him on a saddle, his arms around her, his breath against her neck. No, thank you. She liked breathing. She liked heartbeats, not sprinting. Colt didn't push. He never did. The ranch owner, Old Man Tiller, waited near the corral, arms crossed, eyes squinted. He was thin, wiry, and suspicious of anything he hadn't personally planted. "You the giant Naomi sent me?" Tiller asked, eyeing Colt like he wasn't fully convinced he was real. Colt dipped his head. "Name's Colt Maddox." "Big fella, aren't you? You break anything, you fix it. You start a fight, you finish it outside my fence line." Colt's reply was a calm, "Yes, sir." Naomi watched the exchange, biting the inside of her cheek to hide a smile. The giant cowboy could flatten the old man just by sneezing in his direction, yet he answered with the soft respect of someone raised right. Tiller jerked a thumb toward the barn. "Couple of fence posts broke last night in the wind. Storm knocked 'em down. Someone's got to lift 'em back in." Colt nodded once, tied the mare's reins, and headed for the barn. Naomi followed, mostly because she had nothing better to do, and partly because curiosity tugged at her heels harder than pride could stop her. Inside the barn, the air smelled of hay, leather oil, and the heavy warmth of late summer dust. 2 fence posts lay on the ground, each thick as a tree trunk and easily weighing more than Naomi. She braced her hands on her hips. "Well," she said, "if you can lift those alone, you're officially stronger than every man in this town combined." Colt didn't respond with bragging, didn't even smirk. He just kneeled beside one post, slid his arms under it, and lifted it clean off the ground like it weighed nothing more than a stubborn child. Naomi's eyebrows nearly shot off her face. "You're kidding me," she whispered. "You picked that up like it was a broomstick." Colt carried it out to the fence line with the slow, steady gait of a man who'd done this kind of thing his whole life. Naomi hurried beside him, pretending she wasn't impressed, pretending her jaw wasn't halfway to the ground. "You're some kind of bull, or did you grow up lifting actual houses?" she teased. He set the post down gently. "My pa said strength's only useful if it makes someone's life easier." Naomi blinked. She hated how that answer made her insides feel warm and unsteady. Back in the barn, he reached for the second post, but when he lifted it, one end slipped and it fell toward her. Instinct kicked in. She jumped back, but her boot caught on a stone and she stumbled. Before she could hit the ground, Colt dropped the post and caught her, one large hand braced at her lower back, the other gripping her forearm. They froze. Her breath tangled somewhere between her ribs. His fingers were warm, steady, respectful but firm enough that she could feel every ridge of strength beneath the calluses. "You okay?" he asked quietly. His face was closer now, much closer, close enough for her to see the faint freckles across his nose, the sun-scoured lines by his eyes, the way his brow creased when he was concerned. Naomi swallowed hard. I'm fine." But she wasn't. Not with him holding her like that. Not with the barn walls trapping the thick, hushed tension between them. He released her slowly, so slowly she could feel the absence of his touch more than the touch itself. She stepped back, pressing a hand to her chest. "You gotta warn a girl before you go grabbing her," she muttered, trying to regain control. He tilted his head. "You were falling." "Still," she said, fluster creeping in despite her best efforts, "give a lady a second to prepare." Then, dangerously, quietly, he said, "I didn't want to let you hit the ground." The depth in his voice made something inside her tilt, warm and unsteady. She cleared her throat. "Well, thanks for that." He lifted the second post again, careful this time. Naomi watched as the muscles in his back shifted beneath his shirt, each movement strong and deliberate. Sunset caught in his hair, turning him into some kind of mythic figure, half legend, half man. By the time they finished reinstalling both posts, dusk had melted into twilight. Crickets started their nightly choir as the world cooled. Naomi dusted her hands on her skirt. "You didn't have to help, not really." Colt looked at her with that steady, thunderstorm blue eyes. "You asked," he said. She raised a brow. "Did I?" "Not with words," he mumbled. Her heart skidded. He didn't step closer, didn't touch her, didn't even smile, but it felt like he had. Naomi exhaled, trying to collect her scattered composure. "You're trouble, Cowboy." "Only if you want me to be." She turned away before he could see her blush. But he did. She knew he did. If Tumbleweed Junction had a heartbeat, it pulsed loudest at night inside the saloon. Lamps glowed amber, boots stomped the floorboards in drunken rhythm, and Naomi Hart ruled the room like a queen behind her polished bar. Her voice was sharp, her laugh louder, her presence steady as a lighthouse in a storm. But that night, the storm was real. The trouble started small, just a tipped lantern in the back corner, knocked over during a card game argument. Naomi didn't notice at first. She was too busy arguing with a customer who insisted his whiskey was watered down, even though the bottle had come straight from the distillery. "Sir," she said, hands on her hips, "if that whiskey were any stronger, it'd grow legs and walk out on its own." Laughter rippled through the room, but Colt Maddox didn't laugh. He stood at the far end of the bar, nursing water as always, eyes scanning the room like he could see danger before it sprouted. And he saw it then. Before Naomi caught so much as a whiff of smoke, Colt was already moving, fast for a man with shoulders that broad and a stride that heavy. He crossed the saloon in 3 long steps. "Naomi," he said, voice low but urgent, "get out." She blinked. "What?" Then she smelled it. Then she saw it. Flames licked up the back wall, climbing higher by the second, devouring dry wood like it had been starving for it. Heat surged into the room so quickly people barely had time to scream. Panic erupted. Chairs scraped, glass shattered, boots thundered as patrons scrambled toward the door. Naomi's breath hitched. She'd seen fires before, knew how fast they spread, knew how deadly the smoke could be. She grabbed a cloth, rushed toward the back, and shouted, "Water! Somebody get me—" But the fire roared, swallowing the doorway she tried to approach. Heat slapped her face, pushing her back. "Naomi!" Colt's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. She spun just as a beam above her groaned, a long, low, horrifying sound. He moved before she did. 1 second she stood beneath it, the next she was in his arms. Colt swung her up as if she were weightless, one arm beneath her knees, the other braced behind her back, holding her tight against his chest. The world blurred, all heat, smoke, and dizzying motion, as he carried her through the screaming chaos. She gripped his shirt, coughing, eyes watering. "Naomi! Colt, put me down! I can walk!" "No," he said, his voice steady, even as fire reflected in his eyes. "You're getting out of here." The way he said, "you," like saving her wasn't optional, like nothing else mattered, sent a hot, trembling pulse straight through her chest. Other patrons shoved and scrambled, but the crowd parted around him. Maybe it was the size of him, maybe it was the certainty in his stride. Maybe it was the way he shielded her with his own body, angling his shoulders so falling embers struck him instead of her. Outside, the night air hit her like a slap. Colt carried her several paces away before setting her on her feet, but his hands didn't leave her arms. Not immediately, not until he was absolutely sure she could stand. She swayed. He steadied her. "Breathe slow, in through your nose." She obeyed before she realized she was obeying. When her vision cleared, she looked up at him, really looked. Ash dusted his hair, soot streaked his jaw, sweat beaded at his temples. "Are you okay?" he asked. "What about you?" she shot back, voice raspy. His lips twitched, barely a smile, more of a reassurance. "I've been through worse." "Worse than a burning building collapsing on your head?" she demanded. Worse than the part where you were under it." Her heartbeat did a strange spiraling flip. Behind them, flames chewed through the saloon roof. People shouted, forming a bucket line. But the fire was already bigger than their efforts. Naomi's home, her job, her safe place, gone. The loss hit her so hard her chest ached. Colt must have seen it, because his hand, huge, warm, and steady, rose and cupped the side of her face without hesitation, his thumb brushing a stray tear before it fully formed. "Hey," he said, "you're alive." Something about the way he said it, low, firm, full of meaning, melted the last of her breath. "You didn't have to come for me like that," she whispered, fighting the wobble in her voice. He leaned in, just enough to make her fully aware of every inch separating them and every inch he could erase if he wanted to. "I did," he said simply. No bravado, no hero swagger, just truth. Naomi's pulse kicked hard, and when she whispered, "Why?" she regretted it instantly, because the answer mattered too much. Colt's eyes searched her, slow and deliberate, as if weighing what she was ready to hear. "Because," he said, "losing you wasn't an option I was willing to consider." The words landed like a strike to her ribs, sharp, warm, terrifying. She stepped closer before she realized she had, not touching, not yet, just close enough that his breath brushed her forehead. Her voice came out soft, almost broken. "You can't just say things like that to me." "He'll only say what's true." Naomi had no idea who leaned in first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was her. Maybe the world tilted and gravity chose for them. But just before their lips met, Tiller shouted from across the yard. "The fire's spreading to the stable!" Naomi jerked back. Colt exhaled once, slow and rough, as if steadying himself. Duty called him away, but he paused long enough to speak one more sentence, quiet, certain, and devastating. "Stay here. I'll come back for you." And then the giant cowboy disappeared into the smoke again. The fire burned long past midnight. Tumbleweed Saloon collapsed into glowing embers, its once bright windows now nothing but haunted frames against a smoke-stained sky. People drifted home in shaken clusters, voices lowered, dust settled, and the night grew still enough for crickets to start singing again. But Naomi Hart didn't go home. She sat on the long wooden counter behind the ranch bunkhouse, Tiller's makeshift kitchen set up for harvest season, because her legs wouldn't stop trembling long enough to stand. The counter was cool beneath her thighs, and the lamp hanging above her flickered with a soft amber heartbeat that made everything feel too quiet. She still smelled smoke in her hair, still felt Colt's arms around her, still heard his voice saying he wasn't willing to consider losing her. She covered her face with both hands and exhaled hard. The fire, the fear, the adrenaline, it all tangled into one impossible knot inside her chest. Bootsteps approached, slow, heavy, familiar. She didn't need to look to know it was him. The weight of Colt Maddox's presence carried its own gravity, quiet enough not to startle her, strong enough that she felt it before she saw him. "You shouldn't be alone," he said. She lowered her hands. He stood a few feet away, shirt sleeves rolled up, soot still streaking his jaw. His hair was damp. They must have tossed a bucket of well water over him. A droplet slid down his temple and clung to the hard line of his cheek before falling. Naomi forced a shaky smile. "Didn't realize I wasn't allowed to sulk in peace." He didn't smile back. He just stepped closer, slow, steady, deliberate. "Naomi," he said, "you almost died tonight." Her throat tightened. He stopped right in front of her, not touching, but close enough that the heat rising off him tangled with the lantern glow and wrapped around her like a blanket. "I'm fine," she whispered. "You're shaking." She stopped, because she was shaking, and he knew it, and she didn't have the energy to pretend otherwise. Colt braced one hand on the counter beside her hip, huge, calloused, grounding. "Naomi," he said softly, "look at me." She did, and every thought she'd been trying to outrun crashed into her at once. He wasn't just big. He wasn't just quiet. He wasn't just some wandering cowboy with eyes like a winter sky. He had carried her through fire, shielded her body with his own, held her like she mattered, said losing her wasn't an option. He was danger, yes, but the kind that protected rather than destroyed. Naomi swallowed hard. "Why do you keep doing that?" "Doing what?" "Getting between me and everything else." Colt's jaw flexed just once. Then he lifted his other hand and rested it beside her other hip, caging her in, not forcefully, but with a kind of protective certainty that made her breath catch in her throat. He didn't touch her, didn't so much as graze her skirt, but he stood there, braced on both sides of her body, his chest inches from her knees. "I'm not getting between anything," he said quietly. "I'm standing where I need to stand." Her pulse thundered. "Why here?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. Colt lowered his head a little, just enough that his hat shadowed their faces from the lantern above. His gaze locked onto hers, steady, unflinching, unguarded.
Because, he murmured, you look like you're falling, and I'm not letting you hit the ground. Her breath hitched. Something warm, heavy, electric pulsed through the air. Naomi felt heat rise in her cheeks and travel down her spine. She curled her fingers around the edge of the counter to stop them from trembling. You always talk like that, she whispered. No. So why with me? He exhaled, slow, rough, honest. Because with you, I don't feel the need to hold back. For a moment, she forgot how to speak, forgot how to breathe, forgot every reason she'd ever had to keep her guard up around men with big hands and quiet voices. She slid forward just an inch, almost unconsciously, and her knees brushed the sides of his legs. Colt stilled. His eyelids fluttered once. He didn't step back. Naomi felt boldness surge up through her smoke-tangled fear, a spark trying to reclaim itself after the flames. You sure you want to stand that close? She whispered. I'm exactly where I want to be, he replied, voice low enough to vibrate through her bones. Her pulse tripped hard. He lifted one hand from the counter, not to touch her, but to gently tilt her chin up with the back of his knuckles, soft, careful, reverential. Naomi, he said, tell me to step back, and I will. She searched his eyes, blue, steady, patient, waiting for her permission. The world outside the lamplight faded, the fire, the loss, the fear. Only his eyes stayed clear. She whispered, don't. His breath left him in one slow exhale, relief, restraint, wanting, all tangled together. He didn't kiss her, didn't touch her again, didn't cross the line he had promised to honor. Instead, he eased forward until his body stood between her knees, solid, warm, protective, and rested his forehead gently against hers, a touch soft as a prayer, safe as a promise. Naomi closed her eyes. Every tremor in her body stilled. Colt inhaled once like he was memorizing her. Then he whispered, you're safe now. I've got you. And for the first time all night, she believed it.
Dawn crept over Tumbleweed Ranch with the soft pink hush of a secret being whispered across the desert. The night smoke still clung faintly to the air, but morning light pushed through it, warm and stubborn, like it refused to let darkness have the last word. Naomi Hart sat on the porch steps outside the bunkhouse, a steaming tin cup of coffee cradled in her hands. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, letting the cool sunrise wind brush away the last echoes of fear. She'd barely slept, not because of the fire, but because of him, because of Colt Maddox standing between her knees, forehead resting softly against hers, voice low and steady as he promised she was safe. No one had ever spoken to her like that, touched her like that, held her with strength that didn't cage but shielded, and she didn't know what to do with the truth swelling inside her chest. The porch creaked. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. Colt stepped out of the bunkhouse, rolling his shoulders like he'd been up for hours working already. His shirt clung to him in places still damp from washing away soot. The rising sun turned the edges of his hair gold. He stopped a few steps away from her, studying her with that quiet intensity she was starting to crave more than she should. You sleep at all? She snorted. Didn't have time. Too busy thinking. Too busy remembering. Too busy trying to breathe normal again. Colt walked down the porch steps and sat beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth bleeding into the cold morning. You're allowed to be shaken, he said. I'm not shaken. He gave her a look. She narrowed her eyes. Okay, maybe a little.
He didn't smile, but something soft flickered across his face. You don't have to be strong every moment, Naomi. I do, she replied quietly, because if I'm not, nobody steps in for me. Colt shifted, turned fully toward her. His voice dropped into something rougher, deeper. I would. Naomi's breath caught. He didn't say it like a promise he might break. He said it like a truth he had already lived. She swallowed, fingers tightening around the tin cup. Why? She whispered. You barely know me. Colt's jaw tensed, like he had words he didn't know how to release. He looked out over the ranch, the dust, the fences, the scorched outline of the saloon rising in the distance like a ghost. I know enough, he said finally. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Naomi exhaled, frustrated and flustered at the same time. You are the most confusing man I've ever met. Colt huffed a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. That accurate. So explain yourself, because last night you looked at me like... She cut herself off. Too much, too vulnerable. But he waited, silent, patient, letting her choose whether to finish the sentence. She didn't. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. Naomi, he said slowly, there's something I need to tell you. Her stomach tightened. The tone of his voice didn't scare her, but what it might mean did. She set her cup down. Then say it. He took a long breath. I wasn't passing through town by chance. Silence folded around them. Naomi blinked, once, twice. What do you mean you weren't passing through by chance? Colt looked at her then, blue eyes steady. I came here because someone sent for me. Sent for you? Who? Tiller. She stared. Tiller sent for you? She repeated. Why? To fix fences? To break up bar fights? To drink water dramatically and scare grown men into good behavior? Colt didn't smile. He straightened, turning fully toward her, posture coiled with a quiet resolve. No, he said. I hired here as a protector, specifically for the saloon. A protector? For what? The saloon was in no real danger until last night. It was already in danger, Colt said. You just didn't know it. The wind stilled. Naomi's heart thumped hard. What danger? She whispered. Colt met her gaze, calm but unflinching. There is a group of men moving through towns nearby. They've been starting fires, taking over saloons and ranches, forcing folks out. Her chest tightened. Why didn't Tiller tell me? Because you'd stay and fight, Colt answered softly, and he knew you'd do it alone. She opened her mouth, shut it, opened it again. Well, he wasn't wrong. Colt looked at her with something fierce and protective sparking behind his eyes. That's why he sent for me. He wanted someone who could handle trouble without scaring you. Someone who wouldn't take over your life, but wouldn't let harm get close to you either. Naomi felt the world tilt. You came here to protect me? She whispered. Colt's answer was quiet, honest, earth-shaking. Yes. The word punched air straight out of her lungs. From the moment I walked into that saloon, I wasn't just passing through. I was looking for you. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. She stared at him, this giant cowboy with storm-colored eyes, a voice like warm thunder, and a way of standing close without ever crossing a line. Colt, she breathed. Why tell me this now? Because last night, he swallowed, gaze flicking briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. Last night, I almost failed. You didn't fail. He shook his head. I don't ever want to come that close again. Her breath stilled. Then, slowly, just slowly enough to give her every chance to pull away, he lifted his hand. Not to grab her, not to claim her, but to gently, reverently, tuck a soot-streaked curl behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek. Naomi felt warmth flood her entire body. "Naomi Hart," he murmured, voice low and rough, "I'll stay as long as you want me, protect you as long as you'll let me, stand between you and the world until you tell me to walk away." Her pulse stumbled. She reached up, caught his wrist lightly, and whispered, "Colt, I don't want you to walk away." His breath left him in a slow, shuddering exhale. Then, carefully, cautiously, as though she was something precious, he leaned forward until their foreheads touched again. A quiet promise, a beginning, a future rising with the sun. And Naomi finally understood exactly who Colt Maddox really was. Not a giant wandering cowboy, not a mystery, not danger. He was the man who came for her before she ever knew she needed him. And she wasn't letting him go.